build is complete and it's time to take a look at the finished product. The first thing I wanted to say is how impressed I am with this case. I mean, when I pulled it out of the box, I got a little bit concerned because the customer wanted me to fit all of these components and I thought that it might not be possible. An eATX motherboard, SLI dual loops, a 280 and a 240mm radiator, but it's really been a breeze thanks to the great design and layout of this case. So I'm very impressed with what Caselabs has done here. Being able to fit such a high-end liquid cooling system into such a small case is amazing. No modifications whatsoever, just the custom paint, where normally in a mid-tower like this, I have to modify basically every panel to get things to actually work to fit this level of components. So yeah, I just have to say well done Caselabs with these cases. So the custom cables, we've seen most of that. It's all going on underneath the motherboard. But yeah, I mean, we have this bundle coming up here, nicely hidden. I mean, that's kind of how things worked out everywhere. It's like there was always a place to hide the cables. You know, there's even all the way across the top here, a channel on top of the 280mm radiator at the front. So yeah, the cables were also very easy in this build. I mean, also considering that most of it's hidden anyway. The lighting, you have a perfect spot for an LED strip inside of this panel on either side. Extremely well thought out. I mean, obviously they're reinforcing panels for the case, important part of the structure, but it's just 2 screws to remove these, and that turned out to be extremely important because this radiator and fans are literally 3mm off the top of the GPUs. So I had to install this mount first and then slide the radiator in from the side. It was the only way it was going to work. So let's take a look at the loops. And need I say, Bits Power Black Sparkle fittings, 16mm tube. This is actually Singularity Computers tube. We've taken 2 years testing different tube from different suppliers, and we've found something with excellent clarity, which is just incredibly easy to bend. You heat it at about 250 degrees for 30 seconds, so a bit longer than PETG, but I find with PETG it's so soft that, you know, it kinks and it deforms. You don't get the nice clean bends that you get with a harder tube. This is extruded acrylic, and I think that is quite important. You can see this offset just here. You know, there's no flat spots and kinks in the tube, which with PETG, you're always trying to kind of squeeze the flat spots out with your fingers. So yeah, a lot of experimentation and testing to get this tube, but I'm very happy with it. So we have the Singularity Computers Protean Pump Res combos. These are the new 150mm version, which have just come out. And you can see they're a perfect fit for this case. At first I tried 200, obviously it wouldn't fit. Then I tried 100, but it was just like, it was so short, it didn't fill the space and it looked wrong. We have ethereal jewel reservoir mounts, and this is seriously the only way any of this could have actually worked. There is no other way I could have fit dual pump res combos in this position. We also have them mounted to Singularity Computers mounting rails, which mount directly to any radiator or fan mounting position and allow you to mount components at pretty much any height, as you can see, in 15mm steps. Now, nothing is mounted to the rails on this side. I just installed them there for rigidity, which was really needed because this panel is quite thin and it's a bit weak because it's designed for a radiator, which once you bolt a radiator on, it obviously reinforces the panel. So I had to install the mounting rails to prevent sag. They're very strong, thick aluminium, so they do their job pretty well. So the fill ports, obviously right on top here. All you have to do is remove that top panel over there and you can access them, and that worked out really well actually. The drain ports, a little bit difficult to access, but I've tested both of them and they work well. The front one's easy to access, it's the back one that's a bit difficult, but I have the usual taps from Bits Power, the Bits Power mini valves with D-plugs and 90-degree single rotaries going into one of the many inlets on the pump tops. So coming out of the pump top here, 90-degree single, going into the 280mm radiator, 90-degree single. Going directly into the monoblock inlet, 90-degree single, coming out, 15mm extension and 90-degree dual, and then going back into the reservoir, 90-degree single and 10mm extension fitting. So on the other side, coming out of the pump, we have a 90-degree single. Then going into the GPU, we have a 90-degree dual and a 90-degree single. Very tight, difficult to see. Those tubes were a little difficult to install. Now, because I had to slide the radiator in on this side, I had to use quick release fittings for the inlet and outlet. So there's on this side 2 90-degree singles and a 90-degree dual, and then a D-plug going into the top of the reservoir. And that allowed me to slide that radiator in, and those fittings just slide together. So nice, easy, quick release for that radiator for installing and uninstalling. Looking from the other side, you can see what I mean about how tight it is with the GPUs, the tiny amount of space between the GPUs and the fans. Now, if you're thinking that they're blocking the fans, they're only 15mm wide, so they're really not blocking the fans much at all. There's plenty of surface area for the fans to be effective, and they're also exhausting the air out of the top of the case. The fans at the front are obviously drawing the air in. And we have so much ventilation on this case. That's the other thing. I mean, take a look at the ventilation on the back. So we will have positive pressure in this case because the 140mm fans on the front are obviously moving a fair bit more air than the 120mm fans exhausting at the top. And these are all Noise Blocker Black Silent Pros. So between the two GPUs, I have a D-plug, which is specifically designed for that purpose. It's a 1-inch D-plug, and it's a perfect fit for a 1-slot spacing. Now, you're probably wondering why I've put the GPUs in these positions. Well, I've had to move the top GPU down to the next slot because there was no space. It was touching the pump res combo, the one with the clear fluid, obviously. Now, I couldn't put the second GPU in the bottom slot because that slot shares bandwidth with the M.2, and we are using an M.2 in this build. So I had to put the GPUs, basically one slot apart, so they're very close together. This was the only way it was going to work. So coming out of the GPUs, I have a 90-degree single. Then I have a telescopic fitting, the large one. And this works really nicely because you can actually slide it apart. So it's quick release for the radiator, as I mentioned. So all you do is undo this panel, 2 screws, undo all the screws on the top, and the radiator slides out, and the fittings all slide apart. So then we have a 90-degree single and a 20mm extension. And that's it for both of the loops.